Hare Krishna, Haribol. So we are going to be doing a crash course of the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, and we will try and do it in around about 40 minutes. And so we will see the main concepts, the main ideas, and how we can apply them and understand them in our lives. Namam Vishnu Padhaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadhi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Gokulananda Shri Radhe 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhu Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai Gaur Premanande Hari Bol Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for joining on today on this Sunday, which is in fact Govardhan Puja as well. So thank you very much to Srinivas Prabhu, Anuradha Koli Mataji, Shiva Prabhu, Vraj Kumar Govinda Prabhu, Shashi Mataji, and Mosmi Mataji. Thank you very much for joining, and everyone else who's on as well. So as said earlier, this will be a chapter overview for chapters 1 to 6 of the first third of the Bhagavad Gita, which we have already covered so far, to see where we've come from and where we're at. We won't go in as much depth as we can normally, because we've got to go through the entire chapter summary, but we'll look at the essence and the jewels from each chapter and the things that we can apply in our own day-to-day lives. So without further ado, let's get into the Bhagavad Gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhiraye. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. So, when we begin, we start off with a little bit of a glorification of the Bhagavad Gita. We started off with discussing why the Bhagavad Gita is even important in the first place. And we started off with the reason being that it is the jewel from the Mahabharata, and it's described and it's changed so many lives even in the present day. And the science of self-realization that's provided is still applicable in the modern day. And so in the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we begin with Dhritarashtra saying, "Oh, what are my sons and the sons of Pandu doing, O Sanjay, after they've assembled on this battlefield?" And then in that first section, we deal with Duryodhana goes, he goes with his political jugglery and his word jugglery, and political skill, and he tries to impress the commander-in-chief as he starts describing the opposing army and his own army. And he's very confident and overconfident, in fact, that he will win. And he's 100% sure of that. Whereas, of course, we know he did not win. And we see all those ominous results with, it's described that Kapidvaja, on Arjun's chariot, we have the flag of Hanuman, who's, of course, our Pandav Sena emblem. And we have Madhava, he's described as Madhava. The husband of the goddess of fortune, Lord Shri Krishna, is on that side. And we have all these various ominous things which are clearly showing actually signs of victory for the Pandavas. And so the first point that we make is that Dhritarashtra literally means one who usurps another's land, and Duryodhan literally means dirty fighter. So Dhritarashtra represents material motivation because he wants to try and take someone else's land, and Duryodhan represents material action in terms of fighting. And so the first thing we understand is that material motivation gives birth to material action. And of course, that material action, or demoniac action, if you'd like, of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhan is that it leads to this overconfidence, firstly, but in the end, it always leads to disappointment, distress, anxiety, and frustration. And that's exactly what happened in the Mahabharata war, as we see. But that's the first point. After Duryodhan's all of his analysis and everything, he ends up losing, even though he's so confident that he's right. Then we have the other side of the picture. Arjun's analyzing the battlefield. He goes in this is the climax of the Mahabharata. Everything that they've been through is leading up to this very moment. Arjun asks if Lord Krishna can take him into the center, and he starts observing the armies. And when he starts looking and assessing the other army, he sees his family, his friends, his kinsmen, people who are very close around him, and he ends up becoming very upset and distressed. And he sits down in his chariot, puts his Gandiva bow to the side, and says, "My dear Lord, I won't fight." He does all his analytical reasoning. He gives 4 separate reasons, in terms of problems with society, or this is not dharmic, or will incur sinful reaction, etc., etc. And he becomes very depressed, and he puts his bow to the side, and he sits down in his chariot. And so the 2 people that we have analyzing in this first chapter are Duryodhan and Arjun. And so the first point we make is that Duryodhan, he analyzes and he becomes very proud and overconfident. And he sort of has this illusion of happiness around him. And he becomes very, very proud, extremely proud. And Arjun, when he analyzes, he becomes extremely depressed. For a warrior of Arjun's stature, Arjun has done all sorts of heroic things. He's even at one point, he even had a war with Lord Shiva. He's done all sorts of very, very heroic deeds. And now Arjun, after he's analyzed the situation, he's become very upset. But there's a problem with both of these analyses. And that is that Duryodhan and Arjun, when they analyze the battle, they don't take the main factor into the picture, Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna, if we analyze and we look and we do all our reasoning about, this happened yesterday because I did this, and this happened 3 weeks ago, and this happened, she did like that, she did like that. We come up with all these analytical conclusions. But if we end up forgetting Lord Krishna in the picture, or we forget to take Lord Krishna into the picture, then whatever analysis we do just doesn't lead to anything right. So it either leads us to, on one extreme, becoming overconfident, proud, and again, not in touch with reality, or we become extremely depressed, demotivated, and anxious, and also out of touch with reality. So this is the important point. There's analysis and paralysis in Arjun's case, and analysis and cockiness in Duryodhan's case. So that's the first thing. This first chapter deals with the problem. And this problem leads on to the next 17 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And so if we don't understand the problem, we won't be able to solve the problem. And so this is how any spiritual journey starts. Whenever we realize that there is a problem, then only we can solve the problem. If we think there is no problem, then that is a problem, because we don't know that there's a problem around us. And so that's that point. In the first chapter, summary is, we need to recognize that there is a problem. We need to recognize that there is a problem. And why is that problem there? We are not taking the Lord into the picture. We're not seeing the hand of the Lord behind everything. We need to take, so that's why when devotees talk, they always say, Krishna willing, or Krishna, if Krishna says so, or Krishna desiring will do this, this, and that, because we have to remember that the Lord is the main factor. In the second chapter then, second chapter is a very large chapter. It's described, it's entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. Contents of the Gita Summarized, because Sankhya Yoga in Sanskrit, and it's because it deals with whatever's dealt with in second chapter is elaborated in the next 16 chapters after. But the main point we learn is that at the beginning, in verse number 7, actually, to be precise, Arjun actually changes his tone. So in the first chapter, Krishna doesn't speak. But in the 7th verse of the second chapter, Arjun says that, Karpanya dosha patasva bhava, that verse that, you know, what's the last line? Shishami tvam dharma samudashveta, yashaya shanishtitam bhuvidam, shishyasteham shadimam tvam prabannam. Shishyasteham, I want to be your disciple. I'm your disciple, please instruct me. And that change in the mood is what leads, is a pivotal point in the Bhagavad Gita, because that's where Lord Krishna speaks. Because that is the example that we should learn, that we need a guru or a spiritual leader. Either we surrender unto Krishna or Krishna's bona fide agent. And then we are able to catalyze in our spiritual progress. We are able to accelerate and move rapidly. Because under the direction of a guru, we know what's right and what's wrong. Whereas in that heat of the moment, Arjun doesn't know what's right and what's wrong. He's too emotional. And so it's an important point, firstly, to recognize the importance of the other devotees, especially in guiding and taking us, and us becoming like if not literally a disciple and being initiated, we should take instructions from them, from the Lord and from his authority, representative authority. And then the majority of the second chapter deals with the basis of that problem. So the problem is dealt with in the first chapter, and Krishna explains, we are not the body, we are the spirit soul. He gives so many examples. Vasamsi Jirnani, you know, just like the clothes, we change their clothes and we throw them away when they're old and useless. Just bodies change when this body is old and useless. Nainam Chindanti Shastrani, the soul is not cut by weapon, not burned by fire, not withered by the wind, etc., etc. He gives so many examples. Ashoshan and Vashoshastam, like this. Ashcharya Vakat Pashatiyat Kashidenam. So the people that see don't understand, and they think he's amazing, and all these sort of concepts. But the main idea that Krishna deals with is the concept of identity. Who am I and what is my purpose? But when we think we are the body, then loads of problems arise. Think of a problem that you are going through now. Most of those problems that we name straight away, they come because of this bodily platform. Especially when it comes to like things like insecurities, or you know, I'm too weak. I don't look good, or this person looks like this, I want to look like them. And it comes off from the bodily platform. Firstly, if you take yourself to be this flesh which surrounds you, then you'll be in all these problems, because this is not actually the person you are. The person you are is separate from the body. And so that whole idea of the soul and the body is very, very important to understand, because that is the true knowledge. Firstly, we need to understand who we are. If we don't understand who we are, then we're not going to understand what our purpose is. And so this is a really important point. From the bodily concept, loads of problems arise. So many problems are eradicated as soon as one stops being on the bodily concept of life. Yes, some problems will stay there, but those problems come from the separate next bit of the knowledge, which we'll deal with, which is about knowledge of the Supreme Lord. But the knowledge of who am I is extremely important. Even to this day, you can hear so many classes, but if you don't feel within you that, or if I don't feel, or we don't feel within me, that, I'm actually not this body, but I'm the spirit soul. If I still think I'm this body, or my hair's like this, or my shirt's like this, or I've got this on my back, or this is my arm, etc. We have all these problems that come from that. So instead, it's very important that we recognize who we are. If we don't understand our own identity, then we lead into so many problems. And that is the main juice, if you like, of this chapter. The chunk of this chapter deals with the understanding of who am I. Then Lord Krishna explains other yoga processes in this chapter, but Arjun doesn't really understand them. So we deal with them in later chapters anyway. And the point is, we are not the body, we are the spirit soul. There's a phrase which is, we're not a material being undergoing a spiritual experience. We are a spiritual being undergoing a material experience. Because we are not this body, we're not this flesh that is around us. Because this flesh changes, this body deteriorates, but we don't die. That's a very important point. And there's this story of Socrates. He's preaching some philosophy, and the rulers at the time, the leaders, were very annoyed with him for some reason or the other, and they tried to bind him. They imprisoned him, and they wanted to give him this poison called hemlock. And so one of the people, they asked, how do you want to be disposed of as you die? What do you want us to do to you? And he says, well, to dispose me, you have to actually catch me, because you just caught this body, but this body is not it. I am not this body. I am the spirit soul. And that's a really important point to understand. So we understand from this chapter our true identity and knowledge of our true identity. And then we go on to different types of yoga systems in the second and third chapter. Sorry, the third chapter. And so Lord Krishna talks about, in the second chapter a little bit, he talks about two concepts, renunciation and doing your duty. So he talks a little bit about each of them. And in the third chapter, we deal with this concept. Arjun's got this question now. So he's heard whatever Krishna said in the second chapter, and he's not really understood it. So he says you talk quite diplomatically and not so straightforward about what I should do. On one hand, you're saying I could give up my duty, on one hand, you're saying I should do my duty. On one hand, you're saying renunciation, and on the other hand, you're saying that I should work. I don't really get this concept. Please elaborate to me. And so the third chapter is entitled Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga. Yoga means to connect oneself with the Supreme, and karma means, in this case, to work. So how one connects themselves to the Supreme through work, if you'd like. So Arjun's asked this question, and Lord Krishna then goes on to explain and elaborate, and this is continued until the end of chapter 6, that it's not giving up work. It's about doing your duty without being attached to the results of your duty. So Arjun, in this case, he's saying, I don't want to fight. And Krishna is saying, no, that's not right. You need to fight. You're a Kshatriya, you're a warrior. Your duty is to fight. Why this firstly might come across as a lot of people who are critics of the Bhagavad Gita, or these new philosophers that are coming in the modern day with all their new ideas, they keep on saying, you know what, this is nonsense because Bhagavad Gita tells you to fight. Fighting is immoral, improper. But when you look into the intricacies, you realize that actually it's necessary. And the example which often is used is that a soldier goes and kills someone in war, and it's treated as a very heroic deed by the public. The government goes and gives him a Victoria Cross or something like that. Sorry, the Queen gives him a Victoria Cross, and he's given some medals and war heroes and titles, etc., etc., etc. But if someone in Manchester goes and stabs someone else on the street, he's not glorified in the same way. He's immediately imprisoned and he's ridiculed, and not only that, he's looked down upon by the public. Now, if you look from an outside point of view, go, he's killed him, he's been rewarded, he's killed him, or she's killed him, whatever, but they've not been rewarded. They've been treated as if it's improper. The point is, when we work under authority, then that action is correct. We again touch the same point in the 5th chapter, but authority, of course, being Lord Krishna. And so we talk about doing your duty, but giving up the attachment, the result of the duty. So we detach ourselves from the result. Let's say I do some work and I've got an exam tomorrow. I've got a maths exam and I've been working very hard. So now I might think I'm doing the work. I've done all this work. And so whatever I get in the exam, that's my grade. I've worked completely hard for it. That's all me. Or I've done this to that person, or I've done this, if you like, in a more Vedic sense. I've done this sacrifice. I've done this material occupation or activity. I need to get this reward. This is not right. This is binding. This is going to bind us. But what Krishna says is you need to detach yourself from the fruit of the activity. So do your work, but don't be attached to it. This karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You are entitled and you're eligible to do the work, but you're not entitled to the fruit of your work. And that's really important. So we do our duty, we do whatever duty we have to, and we don't attach ourselves to the fruit of the duty. So we detach ourselves from the fruit. It's not the detachment from the work. Nowhere is it mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, just go to Himalayas, go on into the Himalayas, just relax and do some meditation, give up whatever work you're doing. That's nowhere mentioned. And in fact, it's mentioned that someone who does something like that while still being materially attached, they are in fact, what's the word? They are mithyachara. They are pretenders. They are pretenders. They are imposters. They're not real. They're fraudulent because they think one thing, but their mind is doing one thing, body is doing something different. And so they pretend, I'm so renounced, I'm doing this, but their mind has all these material desires going on. And so we need to take this main point, which is do your duty, detach yourself from the fruit of the action, because that doesn't result in any activity. We'll touch that again in chapter 4. And the story is given of Maharaj Janak, that all these great sages, they come to Maharaj Janak, father of Mother Sita. And they say to him, Janak Maharaj, we see that you're so opulent and you are surrounded by all this wealth and luxury and you're pompous and you're the king, but still you're a great devotee and people treat you as such a great devotee. What is the reason for this? And so Janak Maharaj says, okay, come dinner tomorrow. And they come the next day. There's a sumptuous feast like we would have had if we didn't have Corona today. There's a sumptuous feast and there's all these different items. And so these sages, they're seated in this nice, if you like, dining area, and they're going to eat. And then Janak Maharaj points out there's like a sword is hanging from a very thin string on the ceiling, and on top of each sage individual. And so he tells them to eat under that. And so they eat very quickly. They're obviously thinking, oh my God, that sword could fall on my head, blah, 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 blah. So they're thinking like this and they're eating, and they eat very quickly, of course, because they don't want the sword to fall on them. And Janak Maharaj says, so did you enjoy the meal? And they said, yeah, it was very nice, but we couldn't really enjoy it because we were constantly thinking about the sword that's above our head. And then Janak Maharaj explains that this is the point. You're eating, but you're not actually enjoying what you're eating because your mind's not focusing on it. Your mind is focused on the sword above you. Similarly, if we do the action, but we don't care for the result of the action or enjoy the fruits of the action, it has no effect on us. And that's a really important point to mention. So we should always think of the Lord, or we should detach ourselves and offer whatever activities we do to the Lord. And we should not think that we deserve the fruit of the action, because if we do that, then we become blinded, we become, if you like, a victim to dualities. We become extremely happy sometimes, we become extremely depressed, and we're always going through this material nature of duality, happiness, distress, and misery, and all of these things we're affected by. And so we need to become equipoised. So the knowledge leads to detachment of fruits of the action, but we carry on working. And the other reason we carry on working is because society must function. And if everyone just says, right, let's go and let's stop what we're doing, let's just meditate on the Lord right now, and you think like, oh, that'll be really good. But then if everyone becomes sannyasi, who's going to be the doctors? Who's going to help? Material society won't function. So at least to set a good example, you do like that. You carry out you do your duty, but you don't attach yourself to the results. So then now Lord Krishna then talks in chapter 4 about, in the end of chapter 3 as well, Lord Krishna talks a little bit about the problem of lust, but that anyway we're going to come on to later, so don't worry. Chapter 4, Lord Krishna discusses, at the beginning he gives a verse about how he instructed this science of self-realization, or this science of the Bhagavad Gita, to the sun god 120 million years ago. And then Arjun's a little bit confused. He says, I'm unable to understand that you instructed this to the sun god, because of course Arjun and Krishna, they are roughly the same age. And so Arjun's thinking that you're my age. How do you instruct a sun god 120 million years ago? And Lord Krishna explains that actually I instructed this science to the sun god, and he passed this science on to his son Manu, and he passed on to his son Ikshvaku, etc., etc. So it's coming down that line, or that parampara. And so this is what Krishna's explained, and Arjun's confused by this, and so he asked this question, I don't understand, how can you explain to the sun god? And so then Krishna responds with, actually both you and I have taken many, many births, but I, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I remember all of them. And this is verse 5 in chapter 4, but you have forgotten. And so verse 5 in chapter 4, sorry. And you have forgotten all of these. And that actually, in that first point, in the 4th chapter, we focus on Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is no ordinary individual. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's established in the 4th chapter. And then Lord Krishna explains in verses number 7 and 8 about how he incarnates and what the reasons for his incarnations. And these are very famous verses. Yada yada hi dharmasya gnanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. And he's explaining that I come again and again. Sorry, next time. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya shujuskritam dharma samstarpanadaya sambhavam yuge yuge. That I come for these given 3 general reasons. protecting the pious, annihilating the miscreants, and re-establishing religious principles. I come yuga after yuga, he's explained. And then he explains, which is a very important verse, especially to those devotees in Krishna consciousness, verse number 9. So I forgot my maths. I've got a maths exam tomorrow. I forgot 7, 8, 9. So he explains in verse number 9, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tatvata tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti so Arjuna. Janma karma cha me divyam, my birth and activities are actually transcendental. And that is the most important point. The Supreme Lord Krishna is not any ordinary individual. Some people think, oh, he's some, chamatkari or magician. He just knows how to do certain tricks. He's not just that. No, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so that's why his activities are transcendental. When we discuss in Kartik, or if we discuss about Lord Rama, or we discuss about Nrsimhadev, we are discussing the activities of Lord. They are transcendental and they will purify us. And it's important that we establish this fact that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is fact. And then we deal with about how Lord Krishna, as well, he explains later on in the chapter, majority of the chapter, this idea of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. Chapter 4 is transcendental knowledge. And that knowledge leads to sacrifice. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of A, oneself, B, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When you understand yourself, who am I, and you understand who is the Lord, then you understand the relation between the two. And then you can have your purpose. Then your purpose and your priorities are very much set forward. And sacrifice doesn't mean I'm setting up some havan, I'm pouring some ghee into some fire. Sacrifice means how do we regulate our activity in doing that? So we sacrifice the material things. We don't actually sacrifice or perform a fire sacrifice or a fire yajna. And that these two types of knowledge are so important. These two parts of jnana, knowledge, are very important. The transcendental knowledge. Who am I and who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And what is my duty? My duty, of course, being to serve him. And so when we understand that, it becomes very easy. And that's why we should focus on understanding the Bhagavad Gita. Because the Bhagavad Gita deals with the science of self-realization. And then also, you will hear that Bhagavad Gita deals with science of God realization. Because self-realization and God realization are both very, very important. If you understand who I am, sure, you'll be happy. You'll be happy to a certain extent because you don't have all the bodily distinctions, all the problems that are associated with the body. But even then, you won't be completely happy. Because if you understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you become completely happy. So that's why these are both required. And then in chapter 4, he talks about knowledge and sacrifice. So then Arjuna takes sacrifice to mean, again, renunciation. But then in the end of chapter 4, he says, pick up your bow, pick up your weapon and fight. And then Arjuna thinks, what is this again? You just said sacrifice and now you're saying, pick up your bow and fight. And so then Lord Krishna goes on again to chapter 5, which is entitled, and this time, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. So in Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, the last thing I forgot to mention from chapter 4, we deal with the concept of inactivity and activity, or karma, and the knowledge of karma as well, knowledge of what activity is. And so Krishna explains there are activities which are prescribed in the religious scriptures for good rewards. You do this, you'll go and drink this heavenly somaras, this heavenly drink, or you do this and you'll get this, and you do this and you'll get a beautiful wife or a beautiful husband, and you do this, you'll get a beautiful son or a beautiful daughter, etc., etc. All these material rewards. And then in that is called karma. And then there's another thing, which is forbidden action. You do this and you'll get something bad. You stab someone, you'll get a bad result. You do this to someone, you get bad. You lie, you'll get this, etc., etc. There is forbidden action, vikarma. And there is also something which is akarma, which he mentions, which is where the strangeness is, which is why people kind of get confused. Now, what is this akarma? Good action, bad action, and then there's inaction. Because the point is, from a basic level, karma is good because it gets you good things. But from the spiritual or transcendental point of view, both karma, good activity, or vikarma, bad activity, they bind you. They bind you to the material world. You are bound. And This akarma is the best way, if you like. It's inactivity. Inactivity means that it has no result. It has no material result, neither good nor bad. And so the point of inaction in action, or action in inaction, is therefore described. Inaction within the action is I am acting, I'm doing all these things, I'm doing my job as a lawyer, I'm doing my job as a doctor, I'm doing my job as a father or as a mother, and then we are doing these jobs, but because we have in our mind that I'm not the doer, actually Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's the person that I should be focusing on, and we don't actually care about the result of the action. This is therefore inaction within action. Whereas action within inaction is I retire from worldly affairs. I wear some spiritual robes, some nice brahmachari orange colored shirt I wear. I go and I start, acting like I'm so humble or something like that. Then we've given up our activity. So that's that technically inaction, right? On externally. But actually, my mind is going, oh, I really want to do this. I really want to do that. I really want to gratify my senses. Therefore, that is action within inaction. So this is actually false. And this is the whole point of that chapter, that there's this distinction. So even if you carry out your activity, which again, the same point is mentioned throughout the 5th chapter, Lord Krishna then prescribes this path of nishkama karma. Nishkama means without attachment to the desire. And nishkama karma is the idea work causes bondage, good work causes bondage, bad work causes bondage, but work with knowledge of the absolute leads to detachment from the fruit of work and therefore has no bondage whatsoever. And that's that point. And it's that verse, Padma Patram Ivambasa. I can't remember how the verse starts. Do you remember? Brahmanyadaya karmani sangam tyaktva karotiya lipyase nasa papena padra padma patram ivambasa. Padma patram. Like a lotus leaf is untouched in water he gives. If you work, but keeping this into account for pleasure of the Lord, not for pleasure of your own senses, then if you work and detach yourself from the fruit of the work, then you are not affected. In the same way, the lotus leaf is not affected by water. If anyone knows, if they've seen that lotus leaf, when it's in a pond or a lake, it's actually got this oily layer, not just any normal waxy cuticle, but it's got an extra layer. And this layer is actually used now by people to make water repellents because it repels the water. So Padma Patramivamasa, it's surrounded by water, yet it's not touched by the water. That's the lotus leaf. So similarly, if you carry out activity, but you don't actually desire the fruit of the activity, then you are detached from the activity, and therefore that leads to no bondage. So this is what Lord Krishna prescribes, because it's firstly very practical and very easy relative to the other things. So he's saying do your work and don't give up the work. Give up the fruit of the work. And so because your senses are engaged in doing something, there's this phrase, empty mind is a devil's den, it's much better. Then we talk about, so this point now I think I've said for 3 chapters straight. It's a very simple point, which is being iterated over and over and over again. Then Lord Krishna talks about how one who performs this nishkama karma, or one who performs this work without fruits, the attachment to the fruits, how he acts. And then he deals with that famous verse, is verse number 18, I believe. Is that 18? Can you confirm? 18. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavi hastini shuni chaiva svapa kedya pandita samadarshana. By the dint of this knowledge, a wise man sees a brahmana or learned man, brahmane gavi, a cow or hasti, elephant. So he sees the dog, elephant, brahmana, cow, dog eater. He sees all these living entities as equal in purpose. Because he has the knowledge, and that's the most important point. Knowledge means you renounce the fruits. Because you have that knowledge, you think, I'm the spirit soul. All these living entities around me are the spirit soul. And there is a supreme soul, the super soul. That's the Lord Krishna, that's the Paramatma. And so you see that, and then you realize your relation to them, and then you see that all these people around you are equal. So we discussed this, that if you think in this manner, there's no racism, there's no sexism, there's no ageism, and we went even further, there's no speciesism. Because in the end of the day, Krishna consciousness, not Krishna consciousness, but in the end of the day, we are all spirit souls. And so this type of person who thinks with this consciousness realizes that point, and therefore they act for the welfare of society. And then Krishna talks about this is such a practical thing to do, because you work, but you detach yourself from the fruit of the work. And then Arjun's saying, but I've heard Arjun's still thinking of this renounced order of life concept. So in the 5th chapter, what we realize is that if one works without attached to the fruits, then they are very equipoised. They're not affected by dualities in material nature. Again, being affected by dualities, you're not too upset when things go wrong, but also, even more importantly, you don't become too happy when things are going your way, because you know this is the material world. Happiness is temporary, misery is temporary. And so one is not affected by those dualities. Then in the 6th chapter, we deal with this other process, Dhyana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is this process by which one carries out meditation, one gives up their work. And Krishna explains all the intricacies. There you have to be ekaki, you have to be alone, rahasi, you have to go to a secretive place. Achalam. Is it achalam? Achalam means you're not moving, you're not rocking. You can't just rock like I'm moving in this chair. You have to be fixed. You have to be or unwavering, unmoving, if you like. You have to be so fixed. Then the seat needs to be neither too high nor too low. You not need to eat too much or eat too little. You can't sleep too much or sleep too little. All these very rigorous, strenuous process of controlling the body and mind. And so one carries out by not doing work, one gives up their work and does like this, and they are a brahmachari, of course. So those who are married, they can't carry this out. You have to do all this stress of this process, and finally, when you do all these difficulties and you go through that rigorous system, then you come to the same place that you come to with Nishkama Karma Yoga. You come to that same place where you see everyone as equal. You don't make distinctions. You're very equipoised, and you're very calm. You're not affected by duality, and etc., etc. And so this is what's mentioned in that chapter as well. But the problem with that, of course, is how difficult is it to control the mind? If I said, all right, okay, everyone on this live stream, let's just go to Himalayas tomorrow, book an aeroplane. If there's no COVID, we just book an aeroplane, and we're going to Nepal. We're going to go to the Himalayas. No phone, no internet, no people around you, because remember, you have to be alone. No Facebook, no social media, no Twitter, WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, none of that. How difficult it would be. There's no news. There's no food. How difficult would it be? It's a very, very strenuous process. And now, even if you are there, then how many more distractions there are? How many more things you have to think about? So there's all these, it's very difficult to control the mind is the point in that chapter. And Arjun says it's more difficult than controlling the wind. And so that's why in Krishna consciousness, we have this idea of a mantra. Man means mind, tra means to control or to deliver. That's the more technical way. And so mantra. And we deal with this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We attempt to control the mind without doing all of these things. Instead, by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we automatically control the mind. And so after going through all these different yoga systems, we come to this final verse, 647. So in verse number 47, the 6th chapter, this is truly the summary of the entire 6 chapters, because it lets us appreciate what we've understood so far and what we haven't. So I'm just going to read it out and read out the translation as well. So, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana shraddavan bhajate yomam sameyukta tamo mataha. And of all yogis, the one with great faith always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders all transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga. and that is the highest, and it is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So after going through the process of Karma Yoga, Lord Krishna has also gone through the process of Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga, working, Jnana Yoga through knowledge and understanding, and Ashtanga Yoga through meditation. He said that there's this one person who renders transcendental loving service unto me, and he is the always thinking of me, and he is the topmost among all. And this person is the Bhakti Yogi. And this you might think, where has this all of a sudden come from now? So this is where a little bit more of the technical side we understand. I'm not going to go too deep into it because even past my level, it's a little bit complicated. But there's the idea of a ladder. The idea is one way of going through is you go from all the animal birth, you get a human birth, and you get it in a nice family. So what you do is then you go to the process of Karma Yoga, you work, and then after Karma Yoga, you go to the process of Jnana Yoga, you try and understand, and then after that, you give up work as well, and you go into the forest and do some very difficult meditation and all of these practices, and then finally you come to this Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means transcendentally loving transcendental loving service and devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why Bhakti is not translated just as devotion, but devotional service, because that's the important point. So that we do devotional service to the Lord. And then there's another path. That's the Yoga Ladder path. Another path is a little bit of a simplified path. One does takes all his animal births. He takes birth in a good family. He's able to perform Karma Yoga, Nishkama Karma Yoga, and then he goes on to Bhakti Yoga. Okay, and that cuts out the two middlemen of Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. And then another path is called like the lift path. We're not American, we say lift instead of elevator generally. So lift path is where we should take the lift instead. And that is animal birth, blah, blah, blah. And what we do is we take the lift. We associate with those devotees who are servants of the Lord. And then the next step is devotional service. And then it's very difficult to understand, but yoga culminates in devotional service. These three ways, the extended way, the shorter way, or the rapid way, these three ways of carrying out yogic activity, they all culminate in devotional service. And so this is the most important thing to understand, that devotional service gets you what all these other things or paths are getting, but it gets you there much quicker and it's much more practical. And so the point is, right, when we talk about Karma Yoga, you carry out your activity, you detach yourself from the activity. What's the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga? You detach from the fruit of the activity, you carry out doing your action, you detach from the fruit of the activity, but you dovetail your activity into the service of the Lord. Karma is I'm doing my work, I detach from my fruit of my actions. So I'm engaging my senses in some material activity, but because I'm detached from them, I have no fruitative reaction. But Bhakti Yoga, I'm engaging my senses in some spiritual activity for the service of the Lord, and because of course I'm detached, I'm not attached to any material action. There is no chance of having material fruits in this. I'm then serving the Lord. So I'm an attachment to Lord Krishna is the point in Bhakti Yoga. So the transition, if you like, on this, the longer path, you have to go through all that strenuous difficulty. On the Karma Yoga path to Bhakti, it's very simple. You, instead of engaging your senses in material activity and work, you just engage your senses in spiritual activity and work. That's not to say giving up work. There is no giving up of work there either. Just engage senses in spiritual activity. And then in the Bhakti Yoga path, of course, what you do is you take the association of devotees, you eat prasadam, you chant your rounds, and that also gets you to the same point. The Bhakti Yogi is the topmost of all yogis, because all yogis, no matter where they are on this path, they're going to end up becoming the Bhakti Yogi one day, because that's the end goal of the yoga ladder or the yoga system. And so that's the really important point to mention. By doing Bhakti Yoga, you get everything that you get from Karma Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. But it's much easier, especially in the modern day, because even though people might do all these asanas and pranayamas and other things like that, these sitting postures, breathing exercises, it's very, very difficult to control the mind. especially if you detach from your work. The senses must be engaged in some work, which is why Krishna does not recommend Ashtanga Yoga. He recommends Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And so it's the point to understand is Bhakti is it's a catalyst in this reaction. A catalyst in a reaction means it speeds up a reaction. For those of you that do chemistry or have chemical backgrounds or pharmacological backgrounds will know that a catalyst speeds up a chemical reaction. So in the same way, Bhakti acts as that catalyst. It just speeds up this path. You don't lose anything. Now you see Karma Yoga, you see Ashtanga Yoga, you see how difficult that process is. The same thing that you have gained from that process and the same fruits that you can gain from that process, you will gain simply by performing devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is the glory of Bhakti Yoga. And this is why the Lord says that he's the topmost yogi, or she is the topmost yogi. Why? Because this is the end of yoga. Yoga, in another word, if you like, in yoga, in other words, is Bhakti Yoga, because that's what you're going to do anyway. Whether you start off at one rung of the ladder or another rung of the ladder, your end goal is going to have to be devotional service to the Lord, because that's how one truly connects to the Lord. And so this is the really, really important point, which is made from the 6th chapter summary. We started off with the problem in the 1st chapter, analysis and paralysis if you don't include Krishna, analysis and cockiness if you don't include Krishna. Your analysis is always incorrect if you don't include Krishna in the picture. The 2nd chapter, we dealt with the idea of who am I, who is the soul, what is the body, what is the soul, the concept that we are not this body. That's the main idea. The 3rd chapter, we deal with this idea of working in yoga. We don't give up the work, we give up the fruit of the work. In the 4th chapter, we deal with the idea that knowledge culminates in sacrifice, which means that we regulate our actions. And then with this knowledge, what we actually do is we sacrifice the fruits of the action, not the action itself. And the 5th chapter, we emphasized what we said in the 3rd chapter about acting in Krishna consciousness in the Karma Yoga. You do your duty, give up the result, but do your duty, give up your result, and offer it unto the Lord. So that's why it's that's one that Lord emphasized, and he's always advocating and pushing for that one. And then in the 6th chapter, we cover another process which can get you the same place that Karma Yoga gets you, but it's a lot more difficult, a lot more long-winded, and that is the meditation, the Dhyana Yoga or the Ashtanga Yoga process. And that one is where one gives up work, and we discuss the problems with controlling the mind. And then finally, the culmination of all this understanding of yoga and the various yoga systems has made us realize this one point, which Lord Krishna has emphasized in verse number 47. If I ask again, we repeat verse number 47, and we'll conclude with this verse. So if I ask that everyone is responsive in the room here. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam sameyukta tamo mataha. Thank you very much. Of all yogis, the one who with great faith always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service unto me, he is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. The topmost of all yogis is the Bhakti Yogi. Because the Lord Krishna himself has stated, this is not my words, Bhagavad Gita is the song of God. Lord Krishna has said with his own mouth that the topmost of all yogis is the Bhakti Yogi. And that's why, especially in Krishna consciousness, we talk about Bhakti Yoga. Why? Because this is what Lord Krishna has said. The person engaged here is in the topmost yoga platform. Bhakti Yoga is the topmost of yoga platforms. Whatever yoga one does, you have to end up doing Bhakti Yoga anyway. Bhakti Yoga accelerates one's progress in the yoga platform, in the yoga ladder, accelerates one's progress, and it's very, very important. And so that's why if we understand that we can't truly appreciate when we look at Bhakti Yoga, it's so easy. You just engage your senses in devotional service. You just chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That's it. You might think, that's not going to get you the same result. It is going to get the same result as any other yogic process. And it takes you even further beyond that, because Bhakti Yoga unites one with the Lord in devotional service, which the yoga systems attempt to do, but they end up culminating in Bhakti. That's the most important point. So the whole 6 chapter summary is that Bhakti Yoga is the topmost of yoga systems, and therefore we should take up the practice of Bhakti Yoga. And so that is what I'd like to conclude with. Should we leave any questions, or do we have? Is it running late? We'll ask if anyone has. Well, if anyone has any questions, comments, please do make them. And so, of course, this is 6-chapter summary. We can't just think, oh, now we've covered 1/3 of the Bhagavad Gita. Now we've only got another 12 chapters to go, and then after those 12 chapters, we've ticked off everything. No more to do. Every single verse of the Bhagavad Gita, one can speak hours and hours upon. So we've only just scratched the surface. We've just gone through a little crash course. We can't truly appreciate through this 6-chapter summary the true value of the Bhagavad Gita. We can only understand these surface level points. And so no questions are coming in the chat so far. Thank you very much, Shiva Prabhu. So first Sangha went, what's the date exactly? It's going to be, the date today is the 15th. We've got another
6th of December.
No, we've actually we've got on 6th of December Sunday. 6th of December Sunday is the next time we have this program where we will speak on the 7th chapter. And so we'll do the 7th chapter overview. Mosami Mataji said, thank you so much, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Mataji. I'm not seeing any more. I believe that might mean that we are... Yeah, there might be a lag as well. That's true. Thank you very much, Srinivas Prabhu. Thank you very much, Anada Koli Mataji. Wishing you the best for your exam tomorrow. Don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'm not the doer. I'm not the doer in the end of the day. Thank you very much, Viraj Kumar Govinda Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That's actually a very nice point. Before we go, I think Viraj Kumar Prabhu has brought a very nice point, which I should have mentioned, and I did write down, but I forgot to mention, which is that these Sanskrit verses, if someone came and gave you all the Sanskrit verses, or me even, we wouldn't be able to understand, or even if we understand and we get the translation, we wouldn't be able to truly understand the meaning. Srila Prabhupada has wonderfully digested and explained through the correct perspective of Krishna consciousness the meaning of these verses, and for that we are forever grateful to him, because even we would have no way possible would we be able to understand the Bhagavad Gita through just the Sanskrit, but Srila Prabhupada has helped, and this is a great example of the pure devotee who's helping us in our journey to the Supreme Lord. So I think there's no more. If there's anything that next week, next class. Next month. Next month on the 6th of December, we will talk on the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So I believe that that is it. So we'll see you all there. And please do join us on YouTube, and prasadam will be served in your own homes. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Haribol.